Okay, so good morning, everyone.
Ane teringe siak zu de karizana poke ta zu de niwi tirok lujete ane quality zu shenades. Nyetik.
Namaste.
Nama ba jik.
Name to the
Niwi tirok za jura. That's nature. Niwi. Lurok luju.
Yes, so today I'm going to talk about the recent history of Tibet.
Ane tati shemo di zambala tomar ane pegi ane nature chaton kala ane tozan Geshe Jamyang.
So in order to explain about this topic, mainly I'm going to focus now about how the environment, the external environment of Tibet, as well as the people in Tibet were kind of formed and evolved.
Tomar pode kandichi urezana tomar pa ane saja chazo pa chi konyo pa tandichi res chuki kong. Bosa chazo.
So actually the land of Tibet at first was kind of a source of a lot of water.
Ane rambi jini kali ane chiname druni ma nyorin druni ane 다 안에 사자의 양버트니 안에 사자의 개용보들이 차바랬어.
And then slowly the water at Tibet, so they were slowly kind of spreaded and became lesser, and then Tibet became kind of even with regards to its land, so it became kind of an even land.
되네 rolando 안에 나처 더 차워디 잠발라 디도냥데 안에 진생 그르도 안에 자그르 러다그르 하서바 숨쉬었다서 견이사그 안에 사자라고 차버렸어.
And then slowly when the land became more even and there were less water, so also a lot of mountains were slowly evolved and formed, and then as well a lot of different animals and wild animals started to develop in this land.
안에 다 보기 토먼 루아미 안에 정석 간디에서나 teleshets만라 가시 요래데.
So with regards to how people at the land of Tibet started to evolve, so there are few explanations for it.
다 안에 주주데 안에 셰소 타치안라우데 가르레즈나 파바케레즈 기 안에 쳔질러비 tiu jonshi sambazaji to 안에 마타세모니아 제아니 요레스. 마 tiu 레케도 tiu jonshi samba. tiu 지도 마타세모제아니 요레스. 지도 푸도 지도 무 tiu de pura 파 tiu jonshi samba. 마 안 타세모제아데 파바케레즈기 쳔질러바르자 던디셰서 요레스.
So one of the main kind of explanation is that by the blessings or by the kind of power of Chenrezig, so there were two types of monkeys that were evolved in this land. One is Bodhisattva and the other one, Bodhisattva male, and the other one is a female.
아니 코니 냠든디 발라테니 찌찌 몸부정레스.
And then they copulate and so forth.
다 찌찌도 소람지 판전 주네 안에 베기 나서 세우마트자주라 시도 모자 동동진다우 찌찌도 소람지 판전 주네 시도 메자 든지 동지트 차바르스
미 리투
마레 찌우라 찌우도 소람지 판전 주네.
Okay. And then there are kind of children and so forth of these monkeys. So they started to develop into different kind of lineages, into 6 kind of groups.
안에 거기서 rambi 판전 주네 안에 다 르바드 손 도전로 던디 차니 안에 rambi 머르저서 와르자 던디 셰서 요레스.
And then slowly when their intelligence got more developed and evolved, so they became humans.
아니 거기서 도말 안에 자도서 안에 신디 그리다 신도 그리자도 안에 그도서 로마 그즈니 던디게 던디셰서 요레스.
And then the first thing that they started to eat is mainly fruits and leaves and so forth.
아니 Rambi kozo ane rata tombo ane di nasar gnolon so deje. Tini rambi panjon runi ngaso ane jemba za to ane drogba za to yo jeman dro za tandi ki ane kamshi chabares.
And at first they lived in the forest, and slowly they started to develop a different kind of way of living, such as a nomadic way of living, living as farmers, and living as what we call like not farmer, not nomad, which is kind of a mixture of both.
Bode da ane zanlen ki da pa yonsi sa namado yonton ra우지 ane 청만 문제 제유res.
Yangtze.
Yangtze.
And also, everyone recognized Tibet to be the top of the world in terms of its height.
Ane kashigi ane zanlen ki yonton lauda komila.
Yeah, a lot of people call it like the top of the world as a nickname.
Da bogi sacha ki ane kiyon la pa gongri ngaso Himalaya region to so karni pa div jigala njora me bi tendri gongri ki karni de yores. Digitala pa gong cha de ni digitala. Gong de so majini. Gong yoyo ba jini rejetik karni de yores.
Yes, and Tibet is surrounded by snow mountains, which it's like the top of these mountains are always capped with snow.
Te za ane ngaso ane gongjen ba za da ane gongjong za tendri min tasa yores pela.
And therefore, people name Tibet as the land of snow and different kind of names related to these kind of features of Tibet.
사파구 차니셔나 빼데 안에 다 안에 찬양군이 나서 수파자라 아티튜드자죠. 디 jeton 찬양 jeton이 요레스.
And the average altitude of Tibet is of 4,000 meters.
빼데 안에 다 빼기 침시 가우제나 루솔라 안에 나서 자거도 베어 두바 도서 상 침시 차데 요레스.
And with regards to the neighbors of Tibet, so from the border south, we have India, we have Nepal, and we have Bhutan.
넙초라 안에 라다도 카시미르도 파키스탄 도서 차데 요레스.
And with regards to the west border, so the countries that stay beside Tibet are Ladakh, Kashmir, and Pakistan.
베그 존 쇼슬라 대성가서 아니 타르기스탄 자죠. todo ane sobu to sochade yores.
And with regards to the north side, so we have Kyrgyzstan and Mongolia.
Ta sharchola ane tana jana chade yores.
And from the east side, we have China.
Ta boge ane ta tenko zenamdo zombu gchane shena ta Asia no le jiag zombu keta chimbu ane tukin jonkon rabu te pocha yores. River. Greatest rivers Ajura.
And also Tibet becomes the kind of the main source of the biggest river in the world.
다 아니 Asia no 아니 미 사야 또 돈처 몸부게 아니 추텔라 추트솔라 데데 요레스. zambu.
And a lot of millions of people in Asia, so they are survive and live based on the river that at first flow from Tibet.
가요레즈나 동보데 야루 zambu자드. Brahmaputra river자죠. 티치레 니바드 승기캄보 Andrews.
Yes, so these rivers in Tibetan is Yalu, and in English or in Hindi, they're called Brahmaputra. This is one, and the other one, Sengekampo in Tibetan, and in Andrews. Yes. And it is flowing from the south side of Tibet.
Teneyo zachu ngazo injinola megong lauda. Tanda tanledo Vietnam to so jini dragi river jidwa zombu. Oti techi res zachu zat megong.
And there is also one river which is called Zachu in Tibetan, Mego English or I don't know which language, and it's flowing also through Thailand and other countries.
아니 단다 젬바 마추자도 아니 다데 옐로 리버라고다 나지 지도 아니 주차자 양지 리버자 니데 아니 셜촌이 주데요레스
And from the eastern side of Tibet, so there are two rivers that flow to other countries. One is called the Yellow River, and the other Green River. And the Green River.
아니 다트소 추침부터서 노니 아니 루션이 저한테 가서 백 때촌이랬어. 가서 양롱 잠보자주라 브람푸트라자도 생기 캄보자도 백때 위커니마 주데요레스. 젬바도서 캄촌이래.
So the river of Brahmaputra and Andrew. So these two rivers are flowing from what we call the U district, which is located in the south of Tibet. And the other kind of rivers are flowing from the Kham district, which is a bit northern than the U district in Tibet.
다 안에 보기 안에 다 여름 군이시나 보기 열부 토마데 냐트 쳔보자 아드레스.
So if you are talking about the royal lineage in Tibet, like the kings who was the first king in Tibet, so the first king was
보기 안에 여름라고 주라. 열부 냐트 쳔보.
Nyatu Temple. So the king Nyatu Temple was the first king in Tibet.
안에 디 안에 중앙 디세제나 파체 줄루행기 디로 가세레 줄루행기 줄루행로 야두니 스탑데 줄루행기 야두니 스탑데 졸라 좀바든리 레두스.
And so the first king of Tibet was ruling Tibet at the year of 127 before counting.
다데 안에 셰설라 안에 안남니마 드리퍼바르자 드리셰서 요레스.
So there are kind of stories and explanation that this king kind of came from the sky.
다 보기 저러 토마니 숨추 손이 버들라 아니 보기 루제 유차도 소노라라 가시 하종 그 zon다부터 가시 용원이 비zon다부터 루제 유차 다 야부지 쳔데 잡사든지 요마레스. 숨추 손이 버드 가시 동보니 숨추 손이 버들라 지 하종이 비zon다부터 원이 마인케라고 가시 용원이 인케라부터 스부지 요마레스.
So with regards to the history kind of articles and scriptures that kind of tells the stories about the period between the first king of Tibet until the 32nd king of Tibet. So some say that they are not really valid and they are just kind of fairy tales, something like this, and some say that they are a bit more valid sources.
아드니 숨추 소선 반에서데 선전 공부 결로 두갸치데니 두갸갑지 벌다 아니 종족이 숨추 소서바 선전 공부자데 보기 여러노니 깨다 치셔지레스.
No, 가서
두갸치데니 두갸갑지 벌. 결로.
And the 33rd king of Tibet is called Somtsen Gampo. He is considered to be one of the most influential and famous kings of Tibet. And he ruled in Tibet from the year of 617 until the year of 650.
아니 공기 qabla 공기 소원제비 qabla 아니 보데바 첩스레 번저레 르니 기차니 차송파 열지 15로요레스.
And at his time, so the Tibetan science, the Tibetan economy, and so forth, so they were like really developed at his time.
안에 공기 qabla 안에 가서 베기 유즈 용다기 베기 유즈자 드면 여자 공 안에 공기 안에 그런 게 노는 바기 렘보 단다 토마섬버자자의 수비 미치투치 덴지 안에 자갈라 안에 러저진게 동레스. chutu chide chigir nyamdu.
So also at his time, first the Tibetan script started to evolve. So he sent a delegation, which at his head, Tommy Sambota, standing and leading this delegation to India to evolve and form the Tibetan script.
Ani konkala ani Thomas Sambutaza koso ani Thomas Sambutaza da pogi yuzu zunket da kores tindi ki yuzu.
And the main creator of the Tibetan script was Tommy Sambota.
Ani kongi ma yone ani sonzen go bokoro tsubi jorbu do lembu chazola ani peyu so love. Ani jagorni nonchu so ma dentro ni nonchu so ani loza so gerjiga ani joa nonchu tomar dasa tite ani sonzen go bok res.
And then after that, so after the Tibetan script was evolved, so then Songtsen Gampo started to spread the teachings of the Tibetan script around Tibet, and also he invited and called a lot of Indian masters back at that time, so they can teach and they can teach and transmit the Buddhist lineages. And then there were like great translators from Tibet that translated these texts from Hindi to Tibetan, and all these things happened during the time of the King Songtsen Gampo.
Ane kongi ane Songtsen Gampo ngel peg chul karyoreze na ta pembo zade ane pe yongla chopi zonra uji yores.
And then at that time, before Buddhism was transmitted to Tibet, so the main religion was the religion of Bon. Bon.
Sorcerers, magic, magic, before Buddhism. Bon sind Schwimmbälle.
Come cara signore, da Bon sei kann es aber Gyuma kennen. Also Gyuma Jamida, Zuru Jamida, Tenishi. Chalo Kashires.
Tandri Jama Tandri Tea Galusu to Yosare, the Yana, so the Carras na Koso da Ane Tison Pella Penyore, the Yana, that Montia Koso, that Nombinguni, Naso Salam Ganavja, so Yura. Long Navjata so Montia, Nomba to Chibares, Tison, Taujina. Nema call Tindi Yusamares, young G. Corso, Ane Tato, Lunchevado, Ane Paki Kalogore, Tujian and Naso Jinkotra, Daujura, Jensaji and our Mato, Tindi, Ane Salong Navja, Neman Gungu Tindi Yusamares.
So it's true that they have like some kind of tradition of magics and these kind of things. Basically, there are still Bon practitioners in Tibet these days, and these days they present the practice of the path similarly to how Buddhism is presenting it. But back then, at that time when Buddhism was not yet spread in Tibet, so they didn't have this kind of representations such as Buddhism with regards to the practice of the path, and they mainly kind of focused on on different kind of deities, gods, and doing what we call mandalas. Apart from that, they didn't have a representation of the practice like Buddhism.
Dini ane ta Songtsen Gampo peki ane naso chopsik chani karyoreze na pesa yonzo chikjar on the tabares konki kabla.
And one unique thing that happened at the time of King Songtsen Gampo, that he kind of united all the regions of Tibet and ruled all of them at once.
Then to sono yon chik jabu yore de yana chik sani ki tri yon chik pembuze amdu jabu yubi zonda tri chikjar zuta tri machores.
And before King Songtsen Gampo, so there were, of course, there were kings and so forth, but they were not kind of uniting all the regions of Tibet and ruling them as one kind of entity.
Ane Songtsen Gampo kala da tison ane yonda glasa la puta la zate Monjin Rabbat Zinkete Sonze Gombres.
And what we know today as Potala, the Potala Palace in Lhasa. So the first one who initiated the establishment of this palace was King Sonsengam.
Tene ane Sonze Gomb color, Tene ane Tapella, ane Nonchuk Monjin Rabu Zu. Tene Ti Jikula ane Trason disease, ane Pog Yoro, ane Noneo, Keta Chisha Chires, Simch Suden Bares, Ko Yoro Sudenba. Yoro. Suden, Simch Sudenba.
Chalia?
Yerbu Simch Sudembara. Yerbu Simch Sudembara. Yanayo. Ane Kilu Denja Ngangane, Denja Gude.
Yes, and so at the time of the King Sonsengam, so the kind of basics of Buddhism were established in Tibet. And then later on, a very, very other famous king in Tibet, which is called the Trisong Deltsen, is the 37th king of Tibet, and he was ruling Tibet from the years 755 to 797.
Kong Kala Dampa Nonchute Posa Yonzola Pat Tarchap Donta Talichonores.
And at his time, he spread the Buddhism to all the parts of Tibet.
Ane Kongi Renla, Mato Ane Jaganima, Ane Susu Bella Danda, Ane Chilhato look and Neba Tandri Mombo John, Yon Migi, Yon Tandri, Ane Neba Dramada John, Karazana Penki Chin Chiboyora. These are Ane, Ane Toriag Chetla, Ane Jagani, Ane Trason Dizegi Danda, and Lope Bemanjon is a Toto. Ane Zuzu Chupanke Chani, Ane Lope Joansuni, Dendroni. Bella pa ane nonchu te pa zawa tsukpara uchi zo ane ji nonchu to so ma jagani ane loza to so la ma gyorju mombo gyorju kwato tenju to so teni peg gemba thoma sami gemba ti kauti ane peg gemba thoma ane tson di se kalu jembares gemba
thoma
sami gemba sir
So at his time, there were a lot of kind of, we can call negative forces, such as different deities, nagas, and people that had kind of negative influence or impact with regards to the spreading of Buddhism in Tibet. And in order to avert this kind of obstacles, so the king Trisong Deltsen, so he invited from India Lopon June, which is also named as Guru Padmasambhava, and Shantavakshita, these two Indian masters, in order to come and to remove the obstacles from Buddhism to spread in Tibet. And also during his time, he kind of gave the translators, the Tibetan translators, to translate a lot of sutras and commentaries that originally were written in the Indian language. And also at his time, the first monastery in Tibet was established, which is called the Sami monastery.
Ane ta kokola ane pa nonchu de shabu tarchal chere de yon tejila yon peki ane yerbo jipchuba londar maze ji joinres.
And also, so yeah, during his time, he spread the Buddhism very widely all over Tibet. And a bit later, so the 40th king arose, which his name is Langtarma.
Ta kokola ane kon nonchu le maga che ta zu penk trishi chi yana hakuma so te kola ane pa nonchu de tsame zuwa ke charge teni o ko gemba do ane ngaso pek kwa to tenju to so pa torshi chapshe to yores konkringola.
And he didn't like Buddhism so much, maybe because he had influence from the Bon religion, and he really tried to remove the Buddhist religion from Tibet. And in order to do that, he destroyed monasteries and also tried to destroy the scriptures that were translated in Tibetan.
다데 아니 버그 저런다부터 다 아니 수수도 들리다 지지 아니 다디니마 맞소 출르기 아니 종콘라고 지라 맞소 추벨라 아니 추지 침보 저자 아니 용종 벤도 지바자 든디 아니 셰서 요레스
So this is the kind of main summary of the royal lineage in Tibet. And with regards to how the spiritual traditions were evolving in Tibet, so we can talk about it by means of explaining the 4 different spiritual traditions in Tibet.
다도서 저저 가르라서나 아니 사캬자도 아니 길루자도 아니 과지자 니마자 든디 아니 셰서 요레스
So these 4 spiritual traditions are also known as the Sakya lineage, the Gelug lineage, the Kagyu lineage, and the Nyingma lineage.
다 저저 제동도 아니 정말 손지 잠된데기 아니 다 진로 임바 찍발라 이래대 얘나요 타와군이 또또서 아니 만자도 아니 맹아 제사가 라마 만자 원기 든디 아니 로카 차바레스 수수수수
So all of these followers of these different spiritual traditions, so they are the same by means of being followers of the Buddha, but they are differentiated from each other by means of the view and also by means of which kind of gurus and teachers they are following.
다 아니 사캬자도 수 나서 저부 kuncho jobu zajure kun ka donji o tingune anima teni on jotendi chires
And the Sakya lineage was first established by the king Kuncho Gyalpo.
tene ane nyema zada su peki ane ta nonchu nyema zrata ane nyema ki tombo ki nonchu tarsa tomar josate ane yiza nyema zada ritares ko jibat.
And with regards to the Nyingma lineage, so the etymology of the Nyingma, it basically in Tibetan it means old, and it indicates that this was the first kind of spiritual tradition that was evolved in Tibet, and therefore it is called Nyingma.
So the lobe peman joni ki tandi ane jubat tandi zeke tandi res.
And this lineage was first established mainly by Guru Padmasambhava.
ane yo kaju bazate so yo ane ngaso kadam bazara ane maki narobi gitu telo bayora kongi juban zeki gitri ane yo tela kaju bazires.
And with regards to the Kagyu lineage, so it is related to the Kadampa lineage that was back then in Tibet, and it was formed mainly by the master Tilopa.
다 디지질로 ane 다 sarma zena mandu gilu baza ane to chongres.
And then the last one that evolved was the spiritual tradition of Gyalug.
다 tele ane mi sarma ba izires.
And they are also called as Sarmapa, and Sarmapa basically it means the newest,
yeah.
the new.
Date ane sarma ba ki ane ta chi sorte zena mandu date ane sorte da buzukete ane aso yonda ki ane ji tsongka ba lozon ta ba ze adres.
And the one who established the Gelug lineage is known as Jetson Kappa, Lobsang Kappa.
ane ta ane ti ane jila peki ane ta chapse ki chani re chu ki chani ta shichin chishon rabde ane ji ki tiram nolala ane gilu ba zu chade yores chuto chapse ni kangune.
And then, after the establishment of the Gelug tradition, the main tradition that had the most kind of dominant effect, both from the perspective of the politics and from the perspective of the religious field, was the Gelug tradition.
Tengen la chato sacha patu kala ane peki ane jars tandi zenyo yores.
Before Gelug, the main spiritual tradition that ruled the royal lineages in Tibet was the Sakya lineage.
Ta ane zu de ta ane ta konsa ane Dalai Lama Ramjin guni konsa Dalai Lama yora kozo Ramjin guni ta ane pek son zade ane jigi tira no lola ane monchia Dalai Lama Ramjin kitri pek son ze yora.
And then the one who ruled Tibet, or the royal lineage, so the politics in Tibet, and mainly was the Dalai Lama, the lineage of the Dalai Lama from that point.
다 달래라마 자데 아니 존린 조톤도 아니 트디 간디레즈나 다 아니 틴 러시아 자라 토마 백 투클람리 자데 하쿠구두스 하쿠구두스.
So in order to understand from where the tradition of the Dalai Lama was originated at first, we need to understand what we call the reincarnation system.
다 가르레즈나 데츠데 아니 투클람리데 가리 제니 아니 띵무제 제고레즈나 백 투클람리 자데 또 베바드 소기 아니 가서 리 준리자도 캬가치도 킬레야이자 아니 라마 침부즈 곰바 조지 호연jo 아니 닌지 경기 다점 닌지 경기 연jo 키알레야 이치제그레스 베바드 소기.
So why do Tibetan people accept or recognize the system of the reincarnation? It is because the Tibetan people, they accept the presentation of the karmic cause and effect, as well as the past and future life presentation. And they say that after the teacher or the spiritual master has passed away, so by the force of his compassion, he will come back in another form. So this is what they believe.
아디 안에 달레라마자도 존리 조토데 가르레즈나 토마 안에 다 안에 종가바 곰바 조지라 콩기 기트트 소노니 안에 기트다 안에 주지 안에 긴데 토바자 주레스 긴데 토바 켈로 치톤 삼자 급지 고치니 치톤 지자 덴시 덴지 치톤 삼자 급지 고치니 치톤 지자 덴시 덴지 긴데 토바.
So the tradition of the Dalai Lama started to originate after the master Tsongkhapa has passed away, and one of his main disciples, which is called Genden Trupa, that lived from the year of 1391 to 1474. So he was like the first Dalai Lama.
안에 콩기카울라 안에 달레라마자 민테 요마레스.
So at his time there was still no title such as the Dalai Lama.
연아요 달레라마 그때 동부대 코인바 문제 제기레스.
But still he is being recognized as the first Dalai Lama.
달레라마자 민데 간닐레레즈나 안에 달레라마 그때 somba 긴데 jansu kabla 안에 소프기 안에 나서 아다 칸자 열부시레스. killu an tirop chutuba nola konki ane minte ane zorbares.
So how does the title of the Dalai Lama started to being given? So during the time of the third Dalai Lama, the Gendun Gyatso, there was a Mongolian king which is named Autakan, and this Mongolian king that lived the 16th century, that century, so he gave him the name of the Dalai Lama. So Dalai, this kind of a name, this is it's the source of these letters are from the Mongolian script or Mongolian language.
Kongi ani namche de jansu no je pa janche boy batri ani tengres.
And the meaning of Dalai is ocean, and it kind of indicates that the omniscient wisdom of the Dalai Lama is vast like the ocean.
Da lama zad karres na ngaso ani lana meba kogi yonde dili kon jem meba tri lama zad tri ani res.
And the name Lama is the meaning of the name Lama is that which no one surpasses, that which no one is above. And it indicates that the qualities that this person possesses is uncommon.
아니 다 아니 달라마 컨트레 톰보도 니바니 qabla 민데 저요 말에도 yana 지로 바토소기 달라마 컨트레 달라마자 민데 코닐라 아니 론식 아니 따자레스 톰보 니바니.
So during the first Dalai Lama and the second Dalai Lama, during their time, they were not titled as the Dalai Lama, but the later generations like naturally recognize them as the Dalai Lamas.
다 아니 달라마 컨트레 노니 다 시킨 치셔데 다 아니 컨트레 나바 마음로서 jansu자 티 qabla 아니 콩기 qabla 페데 양 소부기 저보 단다 아니 구시칸자 줄 콩기 아니 구시칸자 티 로바 제발라테니 포테 용조 용 아니 직접 조타요레스
Chikure. So the most influential Dalai Lama is the fifth Dalai Lama, Ngawang Lobsang Gyatso, and during his time, by the assistance of the king of Mongolia at that time, Gushkan, so he united all the different parts in Tibet.
아니 콩칼라 아니 다 아니 나서 부달라데 아니 네마 손제 공부컬 몬지요바데 아니 연조즈니 파 자치르 동아도 아니 데 아니 베기 안가서 손 즉사게 아니 티닌다고 zures 부달라 건데
Karetan?
단다 손 즉사게 나서 손 차사주라 데 부달하고 놀라 접속 손 나서 신zel리고 요라 레콘 던디 zures
And then after, as we said, the King Sonsen Gampo, he established the basis of the Potala Palace. So at the time of the fifth Dalai Lama, he expanded it and built more on top of the basis of the Potala Palace, and he established it as the main center for the main kind of presidential center in Tibet.
아니 콩칼라 아니 베기 추도 스니차 아니 zonrer 던디 아니 지하게 아니 룩스트 템바레스 추스 zonrer.
And he also established the tradition of the unification of the spiritual tradition and the political system.
테니 zon데 베기 아니 다 추스 니차데 달레라마 검체 다버트 지지 버틀로 아니 추도 잡스 그 원샷 치서 때 달레라마레 되요레스.
And from that time up until now, during the time of the 14th Dalai Lama, so both the spiritual tradition kind of authority or power, as well as the power and authority over the political system, was in the hands of the Dalai Lama.
다디니 아니 존데 젤루치토 급장 압츠 로라 아니 자라 센저치니 벨라 센저치 방구츠 바레스 콘사 지지 컨트리 지지 피카블라.
And during the time of the 14th Dalai Lama, it was the first time when China started to occupy and to take by force the land of Tibet. It was the year of 1959.
다 아니 대 아니 토마 안 공사 컨트리 지지반 저 아니 자갈로 전저 연구야 되었다 아니 아니 돈데 자게 전절라테니 좀 바레스.
So at the time of the 14th Dalai Lama, a lot of Tibetan people, as well as the Dalai Lama himself, went to exile, and they went to refuge in India because of the situation in Tibet that happened during this time.
다 자나 정기 가르라르즈나 다 동보 아니 자나기 민뉴지부타니 다 코조 아니 지윙문이 아니 페데 진주 동아이자 들리시거스.
Shiwangoni. What is something?
진주.
Ale.
Liberate.
But the kind of Chinese propaganda or explanation to what happened at this time was that by kind of peaceful means, they come to liberate Tibet. This was their kind of to liberate Tibet.
Yana yon da ane ni tongoni de candidates na tombo ane chelu chito gubja chichik lola ane jana chinjaro za jura chinjaro de jukta baras chin jara jaro tama ti kala ane chinki ane da sejonji pelo tsuyoras
Voilà.
pelo tsuyoras
Allez, chapsik.
chapsiki ane sonji pelo tsuyoras yana le conchi
But actually, the real situation that happened that during the year of 1911, so the last royal lineage in China at that time was called the Qin lineage. So they established at the land of Tibet one of their kind of presidential offices.
Tini chilo chito gubya chani ni chito gubya ngapche par to bede ani karasa gure pe ani ron chimbo chigwon de yores ta ronse jakab chigwon ni de yores.
But still from the year of 1912 until the 1950, so Tibetan people lived with a lot of freedom in their country.
Ta ani kaptiti ki pek son de candidates na talelama ani zu soni pek kwasha tensoki ani chonde yores son de na ngaso manage the mari government
And during that time, by the leadership of the Dalai Lama, the government in Tibet at that time was kind of composed out of the cabinet members at that time and so forth, like Tibetan people.
Kaptela pola susul dapi ane mami yoba matse ane ngaso pesha gormo yorela ane ngaso das yura ngaso the post office ja taso jemba to ane tadi dolon tadi kasakalu tsde yores gormo ma.
And during that time, there was also an army for Tibet. There was a coin of Tibet and also kind of mail post office of Tibet.
Yana yon jaki ani komita ta jaki ani chap soba ngema tombo de komita ra te do ani dijilo konta da nigaki ani pete ani jaki ani chashi zeni kyoni ronze ba ngule cheu mares
Google Maps. But also during that time, one of the most influential political parties in China at that time, I don't know how to say its name properly, so they claim that Tibet is part of China.
Adini zonde ani chilo chitong gja jiji jigulula tanda content as ajura jana marshal sobade ani gutsu pares.
And at the year of 1949, so the Communist Party in China established.
Tini konso ane titsu jila chitong gja ngapchu kidab chapa noni ane konso momo ane chindu tong izeni pesa yonzo la ya ane censor chipares.
Chitong Google Maps.
Ngapchu kidab chapa ni.
Chindu China, correct? Chindu China, correct?
Chindu tong ize min zubuchi tani, min jibuchi tani, bella censor chipares.
And then at the year of 1950, during October, so by giving it like kind of the nice name of liberating Tibet, so they sent people that they started to occupying and ruling by force Tibet.
Why does Chinese say that Tibet is part of China?
Tatsu the takozo ane karazana nima ane 공사 람지 걸 야나도 뜻은 좋아 요더라
Conservation.
공사 자르 붙이오라 거기 근처 람지래 뒤걸 야나도 뜻은 좋아 요더스 좋아 펜션 좋아지요 되게 소소 고소 가르라서나 사법 그차니 안에 바뀐 탄석도서 안에 걸어서 닌자기 쳇다 베드 조안게 고소는 냉엄 친구 띠게 원기 벌처레스
Younger shit, conservation that couldn't cut up.
근처에 공사 근처에 벌써 나바니래 나바니 안에 야나기 안에 친 말을 질라 디 안에 드라지 요데레스
Alas,
이게 디 커뮤니티즈 베이크 송라 테토티스 제데 요레스 베이키 스종라 송원 옛날에 수수 가르르서 고소 안에 베이테 안에 사자테 안에 사법그차니 다 안에 몸부지 안에 고소로 기pen이 오더라 달카 건데 자레 신나 몸부요래 되네 점부지 그 몸부요래 다 뜻속이 안에 되네 탄사올라 다 덥지 잡고 초치는 약을도 소차되어라 고소도 안에 바기 안에 탄사 야나 코로솔 내신 말에 쳤다 피기 안에 베테 안에 고소 내만이 안에 센서지하게 안에 들이 charge 요레스 냉엄용
So the main reasons was that first the Chinese political party they started to have a kind of political relations with the Dalai Lama since the fifth Dalai Lama's time. So this was kind of one of the reasons that they claimed that Tibet is part of China. And another reason was that the main reason is that the land of Tibet is rich with a lot of minerals, forests, a lot of kind of precious things, and so they can get a lot of benefit from ruling Tibet. And also Tibet is on the border with India, and in order not to lose their influence and their impact, so they wanted to occupy Tibet. So therefore, most probably they had this plan started being made from a long time ago, and it was mainly because of the kind of greedy motivation.
다 디지라 안에 다 자나 벨 전소지니 직동급장 나치로라 안에 전보 원유지니 나서 주체 댄스 제대 바자데 안에 라 사타 잡지요레스 나치라 전보 원유지니 forced to sign with the 17 agreement.
So then, kind of they started occupying and started to controlling by force Tibet during the year of 1951. They forced Tibet to sign on kind of the 7 points agreement.
주된 댄스 주된기 아니 노데스 가르라즈나다 아니 니버드 보바기 아니 베데 자닉 차시엠바 아니 킬랭고요자 주치트레스.
So it was the 17 points agreement, and one of the points in the agreement was that the Tibetan people must understand, must kind of accept that Tibet is part of China.
아니 니바데 아니 그저 아니 자나종기 베그 너유그 아니 찹슬라울리다 아니 추킬람리주라 더 아니 론수자이즈니 아니 코 아니 주저 동메즈니 요라 동메즈니 티시요레스
인디아는 주대 동에
찹스도 추다 너유드 자니 다로 론자자이 아니 젬보원치니 요라 동메즈니 트리 아니 주데든시 주데노로 트리요레스.
And also one point among the 17 points agreement was that China accepted not to do any kind of modifications or changes with regards to the political and the religious system in Tibet.
아니 sombandaw jina su da ani jana kinro mamuza jura liberation army te ani pela ani de choza trisata jures.
And also another point in this agreement was that the Liberation Army of China is allowed to stay at the land of Tibet.
아니 타마 된다 거치야 지가르르즈나 아니 야나 좀 그런 거니 아니 단다 아니 백기 아니 나서 열선자 주라 열컵송아 주라 열선도 아니 천저도 차서 아니 야나 롤로 마 이자들이 아니 두데 단다 density on the US.
And one of the most important points in this agreement was that the Chinese government is the one who is going to rule or to take charge of Tibet.
다트서 두데 덴스 주데데 기도 안에 전부 오요 제니 아니 드리 사타 잡지르데 야나 그런 문이 두데 덴스 주데 주자 제니 루토요 말스.
So basically, though the 17 points agreement was signed falsely by China, still the Chinese themselves, they didn't accept or didn't respect the agreement.
가르르즈나 디노로 포기 나요 그 찹스 글라운드레 추 글라운드레 파 아니 추도 찹스 게유 르니도 지바 아니 줄루 치통 그자 트치 돈로 라페 할람 페 메바라 우즈르스 야나 종기 그자 트치리 치리니 토아레 트치리니 토아 페사 용졸라.
So what happened, for example, is that the political system, the religious system, the scripture, and the different kind of science fields of Tibet during the year of 1962 were totally destroyed by the Chinese.
타나 게유레 디오 디송다우지나 베바 베노로로 베바 부 몽부기 아니 베기 게유 머시아 그니 돈데 차데요레스.
So, for example, also these days, a lot of Tibetan children don't know their own Tibetan language and script.
베톤차 베자나 다 아니 야나기 아니 럽자도 손노로라 아니 베기 아니 게임젠다 뇽르 동아도 카시노로 사자 카시노 할라 메 비존다 던디 아니 레스.
So, for example, in a lot of Chinese schools, so the Tibetan language classes were really kind of decreased their amount, and in some places there are even not single Tibetan classes.
아니 다 주주 부도서 다 아니 교육 시킨 탑사된 겸손 놀러러 아니 시킨 때도요. 얘나요 야나종 가르쳐서나 부도서라 아니 나는 좀 좋아지네 바게 보딩 스쿨로다 자델럽데 아니 주니 아니 부도서 잔주 니마치 마토 나는 뭐요 이와 고카메바 공기 다 몬치아게 베케도 디서 아니 하죠 자라그니 돈 차이르스 베케게이트.
So the main kind of Tibetan language impact or influence that Tibetan kids are getting is from their own houses, their own homes. But still, these days, the Chinese people in boarding schools, they don't let the children to go back to their families more than one time during the week. And therefore, the Tibetan language and the Tibetan script is in a great danger.
That 아니 백니톤 데트리지레다 아니 니위 루로노로로 다 공사 달라만초 길루치토 급장 나고로라 아니 벨라 아니 자나기파 베용조 바 아니 센서체니 다 아니 센저 아니 마요 탐메 차바레스 니톤 차바레스.
So this is the general explanation of the situation of Tibet. And if we are talking more in terms of the recent history of Tibet, so during the year of 1959, when the Chinese totally occupied the whole Tibet, so it became a situation in which Tibetan people had to go for refuge. So yeah, now we can start the main explanation, and if you have any kind of questions, so.
What about the monasteries in Tibet? Are still monasteries that are functioning?
Da tensa pola kanisa gonpa yo pakan shira ni gonpa teso nanglola perna chapa teso da lobjon che la sotate tenje da poirobe ta pena kampa tsama in da mone to dina da leka da lobjon da po
다 택하고 싫어래 돼요. 그래서 별로 아니 gemba가 민자를 마도 그나 잡아 서바지 연즈지지라 루체 코르소 아니 자체는 좀지 롱고 봐도 잡아 총총 감니 잡아 제초이 말해 지들 되는 노로라 아니 논추도 러브녀자도 소 아니 바코르소 거치도 지니 아니 러브녀 제주요 말했어 러브녀 ছেলে 기 아니 니토 직사니 차대요 이 손소한다고 그래 나도 파이네만 지나 물론 지금 뜨니 좋아요라 그래서 걸 아니 디선 다 나도 백기 아니 전저제니 숨쉬들자 sombicinho mo que dá sombi tarucinho mo pemi gilonza dicejiwa
신비 선배다리
chu konsancho peni pebinho mo ade gilon pemi gilon diceza jiwa
안개는 도시
ti kaun daujina peg bella melon soa que dice chadeo de yana jong ki chapsi lacha tila ale dice de kia iza tipe che toni an mimon bonzoni an tandi chuje jiu mares kadina
주체하는
ni to ta tokyo bashirares ta lobjo jia to so ron ta ni yo mares
So actually, this situation these days is a very, very difficult and very poor situation actually, because these days monasteries mainly have merely have the title of monasteries, but actually, in fact, so if we are talking about the monks, so they are allowed to enter the monastery only from the age of 18 or 19, and otherwise young monks cannot enter the monasteries, for example. And also with regards to the studies of Buddhism, so they are not allowed to engage in a very, very deep and authentic studies of Buddhism because the Chinese always interfere and check that they are not doing this. And also there is what is called the kind of gathering of a Munlam, the gathering of the Great Munlam, the Great Prayer. And this kind of event was usually conducted during the 10th of March.
kida sombi chu
Yes, so the 10th of March, usually this kind of event was conducted, and it was, you can say, kind of the holiday of the fully ordained monks. And during that time, there was also the Dalai Lama was coming, and there was like this kind of event. But these days, the Chinese don't let the Tibetan people to gather and to conduct this event by the excuse that they cannot gather and do kind of a spiritual practice together.
konso kaki chulu deba romi re laugi yorete kanoni chulu deba romi re laugi yorete yenayo korotoki tonze jeta pina jongli je yora government employee tasola gemba nondra tamda du chogmes konso chulu deba romi re laugi yore somala kaki 로미레스 데바레스 수수 데바제 예나요 그런 속기 종글리제도 아니 베바 던지 봉베요라 종글리제라 예나 그런서 아니 디 낸시테니 두초게메스 gem바노로라 아니 체인지자라고도 아니 바기 추자가 두초게메스니 까티나 낸시테데요스
포바첼
보바스 보바지
베바
리가죠
네 컴팔라
두초메스 얘나 카쿠치로 데바 로미레 라우기 요레티 자니네레 데마스.
So though the Chinese kind of say that religion and spiritual practice, this is one's own kind of choice and one can do whatever he wants, actually in fact what's happening is that the Tibetan people that are employed in the Chinese government, so they are putting a lot of pressure on Tibetan people not to go to monasteries, and they are doing a lot of steps in order to prevent this kind of things.
Is there a channel between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the community in Tibet, or it's totally like, we know that China is not like a democracy, but Chinese people, they travel and they maybe have internet, but in Tibet, the people, like, they can hear His Holiness teaching, or it's all disconnected these years.
Io ero in procetta la dengi di una tezo parola gela mi europe ginsen per referma per giami tezo la shashana ani konso roma io petonet zamuni io su ta genju checho girba pogi mima io ero in procetta gelam tendre checho girpes perna po la io giami tezo io ero in processo un tezo niencho girpes tende da po candidate
다디 아니 손슈냐 페쇼쇼 벌코로 자차고 말해서 야와를 찍으라 아니 저도 니딜 테스 페니 레기오레티 야나요 루가 투지고라 페바 찍라 찰론루아 그 나서 디 파스포르야 페바 찍 콘테요 말해서 티치레 아니 페바 말말 펠리 인케도서 파스포트 미칠 때요 말해서 찰론루 차 타나 타산로나요 산이 좀도 드라지니 여기 타산 루차지즈니 야 총시지 버렸어 타살을 야 체인지로 하나 베바치 컴바치 타살로 하라.
So not only that they are not allowed to listen to teachings of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but they are not even allowed to hold a picture of the Dalai Lama in their houses. And so actually a few years ago, it was allowed for some Tibetan people to cross the border from Tibet outside and to visit His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But so 5-6 years ago, the Chinese government, since 5-6 years ago, they are not allowing no one to hold a passport to go outside of Tibet. And even if they want to go to Lhasa, the capital city of Tibet, the people inside Tibet, they need to apply for a permit.
그래서 아니 자와르비치 그 버지가서 놀라 자요나 코로기 뿌 마세 뿌그 뿌도 설라요 아니 메롬 솜설마 아니 자나종 그 럽다 놀은 두쳐고메스 종그 리체발을 죽대 쳐고메스니 던디네식 되요레스.
And if one Tibetan people is caught while holding a picture of the Dalai Lama in his house, so what will happen is that for 3 generations they won't allow this family to go to the Chinese schools and also to be candidates for governmental jobs.
How big is the population in Tibet now? It's millions?
포기문버 남진 드체나 사야 들라고라 yana 다티스 몽르 도요라 어떤디 시기도스 yana 다다지 정가 티아가든디 하고요 말았어
포기나라 데인테서 사야 들라
레레레 던디치요스.
So the population inside Tibet is being estimated as 6 million people, 6 million Tibetans, but these days they say that it increased, the amount of Tibetan people, but I don't know if we can say a very accurate number. So I think that first...
I have 2 questions. First, why Tibetan people took refuge in India, and more specifically in Dharamsala and Claude? And also, the second question, how does the Indian people and the locals here welcome the Tibetan and the run away?
Karena dia kap sang menang ta pokat eso giakarla ta central chesa te ta danka cheko pekinsen te kareres
자카르테야.
re ta giakap sang menang giakarla tan
그래.
niya chen chen karachen mingsogi karachen te giakarla te pare te chiwa chigre
지그래.
yang giakar ginang ne karachen ta hansala le pare karena giakar gitong kirtesa ne karachen mingsogi de hansala le pare te più mire. Ani più assumba te carrere sana. Ta giakar la teso ta poka central la teso. Tan ngolen chetan kante da podu. Ten ngolen yak look.
그래.
Kante triggeres.
다 주주데 약간 몸부 논이 약을 아니 전절 연구하대 공사달라만 저 길로 직동 급장 납치 말 납치 납디에도 와지라 다 약을 아니 손지 샤티야다 봐 아니 가서 손지요라 도지들라 아니 냥에 렌데니 루카스를 찍래니 디친친 보지 소요 디걸로 아니 단다 공산초 약을 패티 티 갑테티 코 고사 단다 티 갑라 나데이나 나비나 다다 지테마서 티 갑라 공산초기 아니 단다 반디니로 요라 약을 슬레요라 코도 드라지니 걸스 아니 공 첩스기 네톤데 드르드나 코 아니 전전노 용 초아지즈니 던디 콜라 리콜지요레스 초치니 디기 이제라 초신치니 다 약을도 빼니 벌라 추레 아니 게요레 또 공기 차니죠 파베데 아니 드라 쳔보 요자 디기 아니 이제레스
So the reason why the Tibetan people went to exile specifically in India among all the other countries is that the Dalai Lama during the year of 1957 or 1958, I don't remember exactly, so he went to India to Bodh Gaya. So he went to India to Bodh Gaya. There was like some kind of event that of a commemoration of the time when the Buddha passed away from this world. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama participated in this event, and by doing this event, so he created a connection with the Prime Minister at that time of India, and he asked him, he requested him that if the political situation will become worse in Tibet, so he requested that the Tibetan people will be able to go to exile inside of India. So that was one of the reasons, and also the background, the kind of common background that Tibet and India has was also kind of a conducive factor. So the common background, as we know, was they have a lot of common in terms of the religion field and also in terms of the language. So since they have like this kind of connection, so it was most probably also one of the reasons that the Tibetan people could go to India.
아니 다 다람사 더고하더라 이바다 다람사 더고하드 가르즈나 초치네 아니 자거게 다 배발라 아니 사자 몸부지 아니 퇴 요레스 가사갈 자걸 투쇼로 요레 아니 사사든지레 되니 조조 다람사데 배도 아니 티즈 아니 사포구차니 배도 티즈 다와도 아니 배바도 소데지야기 아니 또디 드리그 온기 이지레테 인도스 남시기차니 trebuyoza.
So basically India, so with regards to your second question, why the Tibetan people came to Dharamshala specifically among all the other places in India, so the answer is that basically India gave a lot of lands in India for the Tibetan people to settle in. A lot of them are in the south of India, where there is a lot of heat and very, very hot weather. So in order to let the Tibetan people to live in a place which is similar in terms of its altitude of Tibet, So they gave the Tibetan people also the opportunity to stay in a dharamshala. So they'll have a kind of a place which will be comfortable for them to live and to manage their life.
다 sombade는 단 베바 나서 머리 모래니 용군이 니창군이 같이나 자거데 같이 침보 있으니 같이나 아닌 이용하니 돈이 시대 요랬어.
And with regard to your third question, so from the side of the Tibetan people, from each individual Tibetan person, so they always express how much gratitude they have towards India.
대 여보요랬어. 같이 안 같이나 아니 몰래 여보지랬어.
And with regards to the treatment or how the Indian people accept and relate to Tibetan people here is very, very good.
Apparently the Dalai Lama announced that this reincarnation is going to stop here and it's going to come back like, when it's going to be safe. I wonder, one, if it's true, and two, how do the Tibetan people like feel about it? Who's going to be the leader? Is there going to be a leader?
Tak kongityate tagiwarin boche ta yenger kandisop yansi
연서.
ta yansi chima ta mozin chedangi korlatere ta ngarangi koela ngakare kosun serna ta tagiwarin boche ta kongi yansi chima ta karu kogira serna ta netante te dis ta denja changa mato aniten wala ta yansi chima te kongi mareser Kocham, and tende shigre. Ta kelsi tende ina ta Alleni, ta kelsi tende ina ta popateso di korla ta sansul karere ta sorwa karela pore ta perna yansi chima mape partu ta popateso goti ta uti ta sucha gires.
다 안에 공사 쇼기 뜰래 안에 삼부터네 내만이 안에 베데 안에 단 가든 포토즈라 공사 쇼기 쳤스 그 안에 어워츠 노아데 죽더스르스 쳤스기 우츠 노아데 죽더니 안에 로모모도 서르스
다 셴라포
젠라포 페나 몬수치네 몬수로르치네 안에 로모모도 서르스 대치라 지기 전에 달라라마 아니 곤산쇼데 가르르즈나 다 연스 아니 코로 연스 카티나 가르송교르즈나 가스 페모몰 펜토아도 지 구아지나 아니 페모모랑기 타치아레스 구아지나 거기 아니 용거레 페모모랑 타치아레 마도 아니 코 니톤 자타 올든디 용거메즈니 든디 퍼체송이 마레스
So, regarding the ruling of the political system of Tibet, or the one that stands at the head of the political system of Tibet, so it's been long years since His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave his political authorities to kind of gave up his political authorities and transmitted them to someone else. So,
몬슬러블 제니 미망고 원답제니 고트치기야죠라
So he turned the system into democracy in Tibet. So now the system is democracy, not.
There's a government.
Yeah.
Government here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so they formed like the system that to be a democracy system in Tibet, and yeah, so it's been a long time since it started to be such system. And also with regards to the future reincarnation of His Holiness Dalai Lama, so he always says that if it will be beneficial and if there will be such a necessity for the Tibetan people to have the future reincarnation of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, so the future reincarnation will come. But if there won't be such a, yes, if it won't be beneficial, so it won't happen or it won't come. But other than that, I don't think that His Holiness the Dalai Lama said that under kind of a very kind of dangerous condition, so the future reincarnation of His Holiness the Dalai Lama won't come or something like this. I don't think that His Holiness the Dalai Lama said it.
He said he will live longer, for many years from now.
Conceituagi da cara são parecendo da tane com gompa mazo parku da lomango datum lag de ores.
Lugiado Katina, Joson House Jiggins and Katina Sumaduas.
Yes, so it's right. Actually, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is saying all the time that he will stay to live much longer until the age of 100. So.
And Tibetan trying to resist the Chinese occupation then and the years to come after.
Ta popateco ta giami sensum chegiola per dika su ta sensum chepen moshira. Ta dika su ta popateco mogol japo chepare pe ta dika su ta chima yante jela ta mutune ta mogol chegi leka japo cheto chepare pe.
Chevaris. Mughal Cheva Mase, Tanda Sumchiti Rezaji, Tisum Gilon de Chezindua, Hasala. Sombi Chu, Jeda Sombi Taru Chu, the Pemi Gilon de Chezinipa, Jana Jonkla, Ali Muleman, Tradition, Yaramichi Sonja Vicheta, Gilon Zenatai, and Uprising Day. And big dap Pemi is, and Jami Penny Pat, Jushas and Kati and Mughal Jam. Timase, Anne Chitugo de Gimba, Anne Janangul, Katichani, Mayo Mombajavis, Bebaki, Jamyang. Anne Tijigul, Chuluchiton Gudja, good Anne Jachi Jaton Re, Tujiriton Re, Anne Nani Nito Je, Janala Olympic Sotire, Anne Niton Choson, Chijito Sono, Jambi, Mughal Mombajavis, Jana Joma, Bebars.
So not only did they try to demonstrate and resist the Chinese occupation, but also there is the 10th day of in March, the 10th in March. This is a day in which it is called like the Uprising Day, and in this day the Tibetan people are demonstrating against the ruling of China in Tibet, and they say that this is not your country, go away, let Tibetan people to rule the country. And there are also a lot of occasions in which by means of kind of by military means, also the Tibetan people try to resist the Chinese people. And these kind of occasions of resistance in general, they happened during the years of 1986 and a lot of other kind of occasions.
Can I
add some?
Yeah.
There is an amazing museum not far from here. It's very enlightening to see also the resistance that was during the occupation, although they didn't have any chance to against the giant Chinese, but they were so brave and did whatever they could on horses and rifles.
거기 선수 시셔버리다 디오글라다 보기 좀 간체여봐 미디나올라다 야미다 선수자를 가서 다 보고서 먹어다 nuove maceio di legateto da canis geo medino da de giepo nas intendores
네?
acá está con santo
아, 네. 그래. 대 야부요. 대 로직 근데 잡대 봐.
yes it's very good museum that shows the history of Tibetan people
다소소 다 안에 다 잡차든 안에 야미 그벨라 안에 드 카노테 바테 안에 수사나 보사 달라만 저기 손사 무지여도 무기 모모자죠 my line to map because 대도 하나 니티 용티 덥진도 remember that's no by 잡차 기부 요레스 베기 안에 니티가 안에 야미가 안에 강화테도
and also there are two books that were written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama that explain a lot of details the Tibetan history and more specifically the conflict of Tibet and China. These books are called My Land, My People, and also another book that was published not a long time ago, which is called The Voice for the Voiceless, I think. I'm not sure.
The first one is also translated to Hebrew, maybe also the last one. All these books are translated to Hebrew also.
니 받으면 되더라.
What is the connection between the dark people and the Tibetan? And was it a part of Tibet kingdom in the past?
Poni hi parola ta Java Europe, ta yana candida pore, nangama kalada serve sachote, nangama te bogi chashi Europes.
다데 안에 라다 식부 말했어. 단다 자거기 대선 아르나샹가 되노라 안에 멤버리 진다. 멤버 이제 리치르. 멤버 아르나샹가디. 디 히말라야 리지 수 모치아 단다 네발레라 네발 몽보 요레 네발이 타몬사도 안에 또서 테렐 되는 단다 라타레 또서 나게마 드소노로 치도 안에 다 베기 안에 그저 베기 나콜라 안에 데니 안에 예름부 예사레스 디노니 다단 죽바유라 죽바 그래서 가르즈나 케토 안에 리전 차소바 베기 안에 케토 리전 치파 치교레스 안에 열서 감시 사야도 안에 칼라자도 차소바 베바도 치파 치교레 되어레스
Ani chesa da conto.
Nangama peka konji alin to the users.
Yes, so not only the Dak, also other parts in India, such as Arunachal Pradesh,
I do not know this.
Arunachal Pradesh, and Nepal.
Nepal the Rigon, the remembers.
So those that live beside the mountains, so those that live on the mountains in Nepal, so they are also part of Tibet. Also the Bhutanese people, they were also part of, the Bhutan was also part of Tibet. And we can see that regarding their language and their culture and a lot of other like cultural aspects such as food and so forth, they are just the same as Tibetan people have. Okay, so we'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.